Flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Open public meeting act statement. The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provision of the Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the Augusta, Branchville, and Sussex post offices, and the notice sent to the New Jersey Herald, the Star Ledger, and the clerk of the boroughs of Branchville and Sussex, and the townships of Frankfort, Lafayette, and Wantage. A mission statement. High Point Regional High School, in partnership with staff, family, and community, is dedicated to the quest for individual excellence. By fostering high standards of achievement, we prepare students to become responsible and productive members of a diverse society. Roll call.
Mrs. Anderson.
Present.
Mr. Ancliffe.
Here.
Dr. Karazin is not here. Mr. Dunn is not here. Dr. Kehoe.
Present.
Mr. Arnold.
Present.
Ms. Nugent.
Present.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Dolan is not here. Dr. Ripken.
Here. Okay. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce Kathy Hellwell to start our training on ethics. Kathy?
Okay. Thank you so much, Bill. Thanks, everybody. Hi, High Point. I'm to you. I wish I was there in person with you all. But I do commend you all for coming out for training. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, excellent. And from what I understand, and I am kind of working like everybody else with one hand tied behind my back, but if there's any kind of questions about the presentation, you'll get those questions to Jim or Seamus, and they will pass it on to me, and I'll pass on the answer, okay? Does that seem to work for everybody?
That's fine.
Yes.
Fine.
All right, good. And at the outset, of course, you know, anytime you have any kind of questions about the units that I present to you guys, or any kind of questions of governance, by all means, give me a call and I'm happy to answer it, because the, most especially the Ethics for School Officials unit has a lot of information in it. So it stands to reason that during the course of your service, there's going to be questions that come out as to whether or not what you're doing or thinking about doing or what you've seen is in line with the Ethics Act, and I'm happy to answer those questions. But I always preface this unit with the fact that I am not an attorney, and although just by the very nature of what I do, I'm immersed in the Ethics Act daily, so I'm pretty familiar with it and its tenets and the way the Ethics Commission has interpreted it, but I'm not an attorney. We do have our NJSBA legal attorneys who could assist you, but typically your very best source of information on the Ethics Act is your school board attorney. So if you have questions, you ask Scott, you ask Bill to kind of get those questions to the attorney, and you're in good shape. And oh, by the way, at the outset, happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. I would like to share. That's just for you. Okay, so the Ethics Act, moving right in, is legislative. And it really is, from my point of view, it's not something to quail over. It's your best friend as a board member. And for a number of reasons. And my favorite, honestly, is that it sets the same rules for everyone. From the top of the state to the bottom of the state, from the east to the west, everyone is beholden under the law to the School Ethics Act and the Code of Ethics. And really what this is all about, why this was put in place in the first place, is to ensure that we retain the respect and confidence of the people who put us in our seats, and to make sure that we don't even create what's called a justifiable impression among the public that their trust is being violated. So to do that, that's what the Ethics Act spells out. The Act itself has two parts. And I believe that Jim has kindly printed up a copy of the entire law, NJSA 18A-1223. And all of this is applicable not only to school board members of traditional public school districts, but also to charter school members as well. And you'll see within the act, there's also the Code of Ethics, which we'll talk about in greater detail. The Code of Ethics is applicable only to board members, charter board members, and public school board members, but not to school superintendents or business administrators. They are covered under the rest of the act, but the Code of Ethics is just for you guys. Moving on, the School Ethics Act is also reflected in your QSAC scores, your adherence to it. Indicator 13 requires that you all have a discussion about the Ethics Act annually, which is what I am very pleased you invited me to do. So if you sign, which I believe was provided to you, the acknowledgement of receipt form, and forward that on back to Jim.
Yes,
You'll have the rest of the board participated in the training. Have you guys all done that yet?
I printed a copy and distributed them.
I'll go around and
Okay, yeah, everyone signs that. As long as a majority of the board has signed that, you're taking care of for QSAC, because this conversation is a board conversation, so we're talking about the majority of people, right? Also, as far as the QSAC score goes, everyone has to make sure that they complete their financial and personal disclosure statement. Comes to you from Trenton. I think we've got to have that done by April, so if you haven't done it, make sure you do. And interestingly enough, if a district board of education member or administrator is found to have violated the Ethics Act, that is 8 points off the entire district's QSAC score. So that's another reason to make sure that we all stay in line with the Ethics Act. The Act itself established 5 different things. We'll talk a little bit about each of these. The commission itself, the code that I was mentioning before, what conflicts of interest are, your disclosure statements, which we mentioned just come from Trenton, and your training requirements. Training requirements, we get questions on it all the time because in accordance with the law, NJSBA is the only outfit that can offer you guys this kind of training that you need. Hold on to this slide. This is, I think you have copies of the presentation. This is a great resource. But what it boils down to is that as a brand new board member, you take what's called new board member orientation, aka governance 1. At years 2, you take up 2. In years 3, you take up 3. And you can take these in person. We do offer them, not currently, obviously. Hopefully we'll get back to normal. You can take these in a brick and mortar setting with a lot of instructor questions and answers, and they're excellent that way. Those are really the preferred method if you can do it. But we also have online training modules that you can do anytime. Your VA registers you for them, you sign on, you click on through, there's quizzes, and you're taken care of. You just have to make sure that those are done before the 31st of December each year. If you are re-elected after your 3rd year to begin another term, you need to take what's called Gov 4 within that 1st year before the 31st. And then you have years 5 and 6 off. And if you're re-elected again, year 7, you'll take Gov 4 again, and so the cycle goes, okay? So that's how that works. Any questions, by all means, call. Let's advance. Okay, the commission itself, talking a little bit about them, is a 9-member body, all volunteers. They meet monthly in Trenton when they can get a quorum. They can't always, to be quite frank. But they are appointed by the governor. When they're fully staffed, they are not right now, they haven't been for some time, there are 9 members. And if you look at the graphic, it tells you what the commission comprises. And no, the majority of the people who are sitting on the ethics commission who are going to determine whether or not you or the fellow school board member or administrator are behaving in accordance with the act are not school officials. They do not run a school, they have nothing to do with public education, they have not sat in your seat. That is the majority of the commission. And when it's fully staffed, you also have 2 school administrators on there, 2 superintendents, and 2 school board members. Right now, there is a vacancy in the school board member slot. It's been vacant that way for years and years. Not quite sure when they're going to appoint. I don't think it's on Governor Murphy's front burner, quite frankly, and it wasn't on Governor Christie's either. So we've got an 8-member commission now. Well, what do? Like I said, they meet in Trenton monthly, and they do their work by issuing advisory opinions and hearing ethics complaints. And those are 2 very different animals. We'll start with the advisory opinions. An advisory opinion is just that. It is advice. It is about behavior that you are contemplating or something that you're engaged in currently. You're not quite sure. You know, ethics should be a real black and white word, but sometimes there's shades of gray to it. So you're trying to decide whether or not you can continue with what you're planning on doing. You ask for an advisory opinion, right? You started with Kathy. He gives you advice you're not quite sure about, and you go to your school attorney, and they're not quite sure. Ask for an advisory opinion. It's nothing fancy. You just write a letter to the commission. Their address and the instructions for doing so is on their website, and that's I'll share that address with you later. And you just kind of describe the behavior that you're thinking about doing or that you're engaging in, and ask point blank, is this something I can do that dovetails, that is in line with my role as a board member? The commission, if they get it early enough, they'll look at it at the next monthly meeting. I think they need a 2-week lead time. And they'll answer you in the form of a letter, and they'll either tell you, yep, everything's okay, or no, you have to change the behavior. And it's never punitive, never. Even if what you're doing is something that the commission advises you against, they trust that once they tell you to stop, you're going to stop. And that's that. They issue these throughout the year, and sometimes these opinions contain advice that may be very useful to other school districts in the commission's view. So they'll publish that advisory opinion after they share it with you, and they'll put it on their website. And when these advisory opinions are published, we take notice, the NJSBA, our legal team, your school attorney, any school attorney, because they kind of give us guidance on how to interpret the Ethics Act and how the commission is interpreting the Ethics Act. But in order to publish those decisions, it's written in the statute, 6 affirmative votes from the commission itself must be cast to publish them. So they're not always published, and when they are, they're sanitized. You don't know who it asked for worldwide. You don't know what, well, you know why, but you don't know what district it's coming out of, because it's all scrubbed up. And to just give you an example, I know that there were a lot of advisory opinions issued in 2019, but only one of them was published. Only one. And it wasn't about social media or anything like that. It was about a person who was elected to their board, but as their occupation was bus driver for a private company. And on occasion, that company provided transportation to and from school for the students of the district in which that board member-elect would be seated. So is that a conflict or not? Because, that kind of granular interaction with the students, you have to write out discipline reports, you have to talk to the parents, you have to give the kids direction on occasion here and there. Does that align with the work of a board member? I mean, typically not, but is this person conflicted in any way? The commission determined no. Because that person worked for a private company, they could continue in their line of work, and they could continue as a board member, always being mindful of their status as a board member, but they may want to ask for another route. I'm doing a lot of questions. Are there any questions about talking? Is there any questions about what I'm talking about so rapidly? I hope I'm running it okay? Everybody good?
Everybody's good.
All right, excellent. Okay, all right, let's go back to advisory opinions versus ethics, okay? So ethics complaints. Another difference between an advisory and an ethics complaint is only you or your fellow board members or administrator in your district can ask for an advisory opinion about you or a fellow board member. You can't ask for an advisory opinion about Verona or Cape May. You have to ask for one about Hyde. And if you're asking for an advisory opinion about a fellow board member,
Let's take Lewisburg Road, Beaverage.
a board member on that letter. But with an ethics complaint, they can be filed by anyone against you. So they could be a staff member, it could be a student, it could be a community member, it could be a fellow board member. Anyone can file an ethics complaint against you, but an ethics complaint is about behavior that has already happened. And the complainant needs to show the commission that the behavior did indeed occur. The commission does not investigate based on a newspaper article. You need to furnish some kind of proof that the code of ethics was violated or the act was violated, right? And if there is, if it is determined by the commission that you are in violation of the act, then it is punitive. There are 4 different penalties that the commission can ditch out to you. And here they are ranging in degrees of severity. A reprimand is just kind of like a letter between you and the Commissioner of Education, pretty much saying, oops, that was wrong, don't do that again. A censure is a little more formal. A censure is where the board president has to read from the dais that you've been found in violation of the Ethics Act and the Commissioner disapproves. A suspension is exactly that. You could be suspended for a certain number of days, a certain number of meetings. And if the complaint is severe enough and the violation is severe enough, you can be removed. Also, there's no money involved. It's just pretty much embarrassment and possibly an interruption in service. But you can be fined by the Ethics Commission if you file a frivolous complaint. And that's rare. Quite frankly, all of these decisions, Ethics Commission's decisions on ethics complaints, are published on their website. They are not scrubbed. All names, district names, and all warts are right there in the decisions for anyone to look at. So I've seen a lot of these, and I advise you to look at them too. They make for a really interesting read. Sometimes amusing, but it's up there. And you'll notice, though, that the commission very rarely fines anyone for filing a frivolous complaint. They are asked all the time to find complaints frivolous. It's very rare that they do so. But maybe in a sign of what the year 2020 is going to be like, they've actually fined somebody already. A superintendent filed a ethics complaint against a board member for asking a question at the dais that the superintendent could not answer. The superintendent thought the board member was asking that question on purpose to embarrass him, so he filed an ethics complaint. And not only did the commission find the complaint invalid, they found it frivolous, and they fined the superintendent $100. It's been a long time since they did that, and it's a very interesting decision. You may want to look at that one. Okay? Now, why did this guy file an ethics complaint? Why do most people file an ethics complaint? Well, typically it's because a board member has violated some section of the Code of Ethics. And the Code of Ethics is just for school board members, as I mentioned before. It was added into the legislation later. I think it was like 2004 or something. I think it was when the Act itself dated to the 1990s. But it goes in subsections from A to J. And we'll kind of look through these slide by slide, but I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I know you guys can read them yourselves. What I think you might have, and if you don't have it yet, I certainly have physical copies for you. I'll get them to you. It's a do's and don'ts for the Code of Ethics, and that's a really helpful document. It's a lot less dry than all of this legalese, and it's more interpretive. I think that it's more useful to board members. But just to go through this, subsection by subsection, if you look here, I have the actual subsection in the little tan boxes, and underneath, in the small print, is what someone who is violating, who is alleging that a violation has occurred based on, let's say, subsection A. The fine print shows you what they would have to furnish to the Ethics Commission to prove the violation. So starting with subsection A, that one's an easy one. You'll uphold all laws, everything you're supposed to do. If the State Board of Education tells you to do it, tells you to give the park exam, you give the park exam. The courts tell you to do something, you gotta do it. If there's legislation in place, you need to follow the legislation. Otherwise, if you're found to have violated the legislation or, the directives from the court, the state board, etc., you violated A. Okay? B is my favorite. B is really why you're a board member, right? This is why you're not on the town council. This is why you're not on the and the governing board of any other particular municipal body. You're on Board of Education because you are looking to make decisions in terms of the welfare of all the children in your district. Okay, regardless of ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing, that's how the code reads. But you're here for all kids, not just your own kids, not just the gifted and talented kids, not just the Irish kids, but everybody, right? So that's kind of speaks for itself. C is a job description because a Board of Education has 4 functions, right? Policy making, planning, and oversight and appraisal, and communication with the community. Well, the Ethics Commission may not be so concerned about communication with the community, but they certainly are concerned with policy making, planning, and appraisal. And subsection C says that as a board member, you're going to limit your board action to the following. And you will only frame policies after you've consulted with those who will be affected by them. Right there, in a nutshell, is why public commentary is so important. You give the public a chance to weigh in on the policies that you're about to enact, and you do that through a first reading and second reading, right? Okay. D, you've heard this a million times, and if you haven't, I'm happy to be the first person to tell you that you will carry out your responsibility not to run the schools, but, and here's the key phrase, together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run. So it's not all on you. It can't be all on you to oversee the policy making and the planning and the appraisal that the board engages in. It's a function of the body of the Board of Education, aka the majority, the rules. Any kind of decision that the board makes, you are obligated to uphold, even if you were on the losing side. And the other thing too is that your authority as a board member is only in effect when you're at the table with your fellow board members, right? So as an individual, we don't have any kind of authority. It's only when we're voting on agenda items. And of course, a subsection B really does address point blank the issue of managing. We do manage as board members. The term usually thrown around is micromanagement. I don't even use micromanagement anymore because it's kind of difficult to determine what micromanagement is. Board members don't manage, period. That's what our superintendent is for do that, or oversight. And subsection D really dovetails beautifully with E, which recognizes that authority rests with the board itself, right? With everyone at the dais, majority vote. That's where the authority comes. So as individuals, we don't make any kind of personal promises or take any kind of private action on our own. We don't present ourselves as the Board of Education because we simply are not. F, I don't usually need to waste a lot of breath on. Use your own independent judgment. Don't, bow to political groups or any kind of special interest group or union. You use your own independent judgment when making decisions, and it should have nothing to do with the gain of yourself or friends. And G is a big one. G gets violated all the time, and we don't know why, because it's kind of black and white, no leaks, no leaks. If it's confidential, it needs to stay confidential. Your superintendent, he gives you a memo that says this is confidential. It's not to be shared with anyone else from the board. If there's a discussion that's going on in executive session, it stays in executive session. And this kind of thing is really painful when it's violated, because this is the sort of thing that actually not just compromises the ability of the board to do its work, but it hurts people, you know, it actually hurts individuals. So G is mighty important. Moving on to H, this is an easy one. You need the recommendation of your superintendent to vote on any kind of personnel appointments, which makes sense since that's our educational leader. We have the right person in place to make those choices for us. We do have to vote on them, and we can vote on them yes or no, but you can't just pull out of your back pocket, you know, an individual who you think might be better suited to the job. Thank God that doesn't typically happen. Boards understand that, you know, we're made up of working people, that's the beauty of this system, where you don't have to have a doctorate in education or a long career in public education to serve as a representative for your community on the board, but you do have to put in place the right educational leader by appointing a superintendent and evaluating the superintendent every year to make sure that, you know, they're accountable for the decisions that they make. But as far as personnel appointments go, you know, you need the recommendation and you need to pay close attention to it of the superintendent. Supporting and protecting school personnel in the proper performance of their duties, subsection I. That's my second favorite, right after B, because this one kind of gets you out of a lot of conversations that people pull you into, like cocktail parties and on the soccer field, you know, after church or what have you, supermarket. Someone might come up to you and try to engage you in a conversation about what's going on with their child's coach or their teacher or something they've heard about a particular staff member that's just designed to curl your hair if you still have any. And you know what? It's just not our job, which comes under D, to have anything to do with the management of the schools or personnel. But on top of that, we are beholden to support and protect school personnel and the proper performance of their duties, so we're out of those conversations. And we can extricate ourselves from those very easily by just explaining, you know, it's not my place to have the conversation with you because of the Ethics Act, but what you do need to do, you know, concerned citizen or parent or something like that, because it's not like they're bad people or anything giving you this complaint, they just don't understand the chain of command perhaps. And this dovetails beautifully into J. You need to explain the chain of command to those who are complaining. You know, if you have a complaint with a teacher, take it up with the teacher. If that doesn't work, advance to the school principal, perhaps advance to another director, and then ultimately it gets to, well, kind of ultimately it gets to the superintendent. If the complaint is not solved to the complainant's satisfaction by the superintendent, only then can the person come before the board. And that means the board can only act on complaints after the failure of an administrative solution. The administrative solution is the last stop on the chain of command. In the meantime, if and when you do hear complaints about the school or a staffer or the superintendent or something that has to do with the school, you do need to let the superintendent know. And when you let the superintendent know about the complaint that you heard, you do not say, you know, Scott, fix this, Scott, follow up with this, Scott, let me know how this is going, keep in touch with me on this. No. You just tell Scott what's going on and leave it to the devices of the chain of command and Scott himself to follow it. Because again, that's management, that's not oversight. Does all of that sense, everybody? Any questions on all this stuff?
No questions so far.
Questions?
All right, thank you guys for sticking with this. I can imagine how dry this is. So let's get to some fun stuff. Other people's misbehavior over the past year. These are some decisions that came down over 2019. The first one was kind of interesting because it's a violation of G, the confidentiality. This was a relatively new board member who came into possession, I think it was an email, about a student discipline issue. That was very interesting. And he thought it was so interesting that he shared it with his family. Presumably forwarded them an email. And the family thought that it was a very interesting issue as well. So they started to share it with their friends. And that language there, which was then shared with countless others, actually comes from the decision. I didn't type that in there myself. It's as corny as it sounds. But this thing spread like wildfire. And even though the student was not named in the email, you could kind of tell who it was, or at least somebody could tell who it was. And once it got out there into the public domain, the board member felt awful about it. Mea culpa, realized immediately what he had done wrong. Regardless of how regretful he was, the school ethics commission skipped right over reprimand and landed a censure in his lap. So that wasn't very good. But it kind of makes a strong statement as to how strongly the ethics commission takes the issues of confidentiality. Second bullet point, very interesting. Down the shore in South Jersey, right before a board meeting, a board member went up to the director of curriculum and said, "Hey, you ever see yourself as a superintendent here? Because I think you're a great superintendent. I think you'd be much better than the superintendent that we have." Problem, of course, was the board was not looking for a new superintendent. The seat was not vacant. And it put the director of curriculum in a really awkward position. And she complained to the superintendent and an ethics complaint was filed against this member. And they were given a reprimand even though they had violated 2 tenets of the school, the code of ethics, E and I. See, they only got a reprimand, but they got their slap. Third bullet point, out of Perth Amboy. Now this thing took years to go through the ethics commission, hearings, the administrative law judge heard it. But basically what happened was there was a meeting of the teachers union, and the board member that really hated the superintendent in place attended the meeting and said to the union, "You know what, guys, just hang on. We can't stand the superintendent either. The board's real hard to get rid of her. We support you, XYZ. But this person was not speaking on behalf of the board at all. So they got suspended 60 days. And you may remember that last bullet point there. Lady in South Orange, speeding her daughter to school, was pulled over by a cop. The dash cam recorded the whole thing. The board member said, "A school board member, how dare you, blah, blah, blah," used inappropriate language. And not only did she get on the news, but she got a 30-day suspension from the Ethics Commission for violating B and F. Very interesting, case. The other thing too was she said the Ethics Commission was really not qualified to judge her, but her suspension stood. She's back on the board. This person, however, is not on the board for this was just awful. This board member also out of Perth Amboy. This board member had an auto body shop down the street from the school where his wife was a teacher. So he just walks in and out of the school and not obey any kind of security protocols at all because, after all, he's a board member and he's too important. They don't apply to him. And also, he was meeting with the school secretary and trying to collude with him, making statements that the superintendent was blackmailing the secretary. And the incident hidden, you can read all this, it's on the Ethics Commission website, was that the secretary was selling alcoholic beverages out of his car trunk at a school event. Superintendent determined that that didn't exactly happen, and there was no need for a further investigation, and I don't know, it just became a real big mess. But it ended up with an ethics violation, complaint file, and wow, all these violations, B, D, E, I, J, all of this stuff. And the only reason why the penalty was mild as a censure was because this person was off the board. They did not win re-election by the time all this was tied up. If they had still been on the board, the Ethics Commission would have recommended a suspension. Okay? Another part
Can I ask
of
a
the...
question real quick, Kathy? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. No, it's all good.
Let's assume, for the sake of just assumption, that an ethics violation was determined to be worthy of a censure, and that you stated that that had an impact on the QSAC score. To who
Yes.
who communicates that to those doing the QSAC, or must it somehow, I mean, how do they become made aware of that?
Well, in the case of a censure, the board president has to read from the dais, notice that the board member was found in violation of the Ethics Act. So that will be part of your minutes. So when you're doing the QSAC, that'll have to, that evidence will have to go, to the executive county superintendent, that you're gonna be losing points because of that censure.
I don't think that happened, but thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's really tough, and you know what, Scott, really stinks, is that the Ethics Act and the Code of Ethics, they're really targeted towards individuals, right? They're targeted towards grown adults and their behavior. And this is also the method by which we police board member behavior, right? It's not perfect, it's not a lot of flaws, but this is really all we've got at the end of the day, right? So if you have a board member who's misbehaving to the point where you gotta file an ethics complaint, you gotta file an ethics complaint. But what a shame that the entire school district is impacted negatively by that. I mean, it really is a heartbreaker. That's just my opinion there. That's not the stance of NJSBA, but I just wish there was a better way. But it is what it is. So I'm grateful that you guys have me in so we can really unpack all this stuff, as dry as it is. I do commend you for having the big, the big long ethics workshop, honestly, rather than just signing the code of ethics at New York and calling it a day. So conflicts of interest are also part of the School Ethics Act, and you have the whole act in front of you. So it delineates everything, but they're kind of obvious. I mean, for at least some of them, you need to recuse yourself from any kind of discussions that might seem to that you might seem to have a business interest in, or that might have any kind of financial involvement of you or your family. Obviously, if there's any kind of advantage that you might, as an individual or someone belonging to you, might attain, if you should vote on a particular way on an agenda item, then you need to recuse yourself from that agenda item, right? No vote, no discussion. You can still stay on the board, but you just have to step away from certain agenda items and discussion. And if you look at the goldenrod colored bar at the bottom of that slide, it gives the definition of immediate family for purposes of the School Ethics Commission. I wish that was a little bit bigger, but let's read it and make a point of paying attention to it. The definition of immediate family is a spouse or dependent child who lives in the same household as you. So, for purposes of the Ethics Act, your mother is not your immediate family member. Your grown son who lives in Connecticut is not your immediate family member. It's only your spouse or dependent child who lives with you, okay? But the people, along with many others, your mom, your Connecticut living son, are relatives. They are included under the SEC's definition of relative, and it's a wide net. Who qualifies as a relative? Well, we're using the definition from the accountability regs, and it includes all of these parties: step-parent, domestic partner, grandchild, half-sister, etc., etc., etc. Notice, it does not include cousin. Interesting. But all of these people, whether they are related to you or your spouse by blood, marriage, or adoption, that's your relative. Okay? And the reason why we talk about immediate family members and relatives is because they help determine whether you're conflicted or not. So let's talk a little bit about hiring for personnel. The board cannot hire a relative or immediate family member of a board member or chief school administrator unless the executive county superintendent grants you a waiver, because sometimes that'll happen, especially in remote districts. You're looking for, someone to teach, I don't know, high school. Honestly, Latin teachers, right, are a little hard to find. And if you can't find someone after doing an exhaustive search, but a board member's nephew happens to be a high school Latin teacher, you would be able to hire that person on the okay of the executive county superintendent. It's rare, but it happens. Now, if you have someone belonging to you who already works in the district, that's fine. You can still be a board member. You just cannot take part in certain things, namely the hiring or evaluation of a superintendent, anything to do with the superintendent's contract or merit goals, anything like that, you just sit out. Pretty basic. And you cannot take part in any kind of employment matters regarding anyone who's on the chain of command between your relative and that person, right? So if you have someone who belongs to you who works in the school and the principal is up for renewal, you'll need to sit out that vote, okay? Or any kind of discussions in executive session about the principal, you really can't do, okay? But when it really comes to play, and who's your relative and who's your immediate family member, where they work, is when we determine who can be involved in collective bargaining. And this chart is a beauty. It comes right from Advisory Opinion 8024-17, which means the commission itself wrote this one up. This is not an NJSBA thing, as lovely as it is. It comes from the commission. If you read that decision, you'll see this chart. So what it means is that you have an immediate family member or a relative, okay? So both the narrow definition of immediate family and the wide definition of relative, who works in the district. You cannot participate in negotiations. If you have an immediate family member who works out of district, and let's say who is in the teachers union in, I don't know, Cedar Grove, right? You are out of negotiations with your own local bargaining union, your own local teachers union, until memorandum of agreement is reached and ratified by both committees. Your salary guides, your total compensation package, all of that's been worked out. Once all that's done, you're back in for the final vote. If you have a relative, okay, the big definition, who works out of district in, I don't know, Flemington, then you're in from start to finish. You'll notice those asterisks, okay, which means absent another conflict. So sometimes these are very fact sensitive, and we'll want to run this by your board attorney just to make sure that you're not conflicted. But here are some of the reasons that the SEC has determined may be conflicts for you. And the most important of those, or the most frequent of those, I guess I should say, is that third bullet point. If your relative has union involvement, for instance, if my sister-in-law was on her local union's negotiations team in Pompton Lakes, then I could not participate in negotiations at my local board level. If if my, niece is, the president of her local union, then I'm most likely out of negotiations in my local board, okay? Also of note is that if you receive the endorsement of the union in your reelection bid, you need to sit out negotiations for a year, okay? Then you're back in. However, back in 2018, very interesting case came before the commission, where there was a board member who was on their negotiations committee, and the board was involved, as so many of us are these days, in lengthy and protracted negotiations. It was difficult. The union was not happy with the board's negotiations. The person was up for re-election. The member was up for re-election, they were unopposed. There was no one else on the ballot. Nevertheless, he was approached by the union and they said, we'd like to contribute some money to your re-election campaign and we'd like to endorse. The member said, no, I'm not on your campaign, I'm unopposed, I don't want your money, and I don't want your endorsement. So they kept their money in their pockets, but the union produced all sorts of letters to their members, urging their members to vote for this board member. And when he was indeed reelected, because he was the only name on the ballot, the union approached the successful candidate and said, well, congrats on your re-election, but it's too bad you can't stay on the negotiations team because we endorsed you, so I guess you're off for the next year. And the board members said, oh, no, you don't. And he wrote to the Ethics Commission for an advisory opinion, and the commission said, you know what, you didn't take any money, so it's not an endorsement. Very interesting tactic there, though. Got to applaud them for creativity. I thought that would happen one of these days, and it did, but it worked out the way you wanted. Doctrine of necessity, I don't think I have to talk about too much, except you should know that if a majority of board members are conflicted on a particular issue and are not able to vote because they're conflicted, then you just need to invoke what's called the doctrine of necessity, and everybody's backing. And the doctrine of necessity is basically just saying, why a majority is conflicted for each individual reason, and then you can vote. But you can't discuss things, and you can't have a committee. It's only about, based on the doctrine of necessity, it's only about voting. So honestly, there's a district out there that have only one member on their negotiations team because the rest of the board was conflicted. But you guys don't have to worry about that in my point, so I guess we don't have to talk about it too much. You probably see this, it's a true-false thing, and I think it's pre-filling. I don't know how to get it to un-pre-fill over WebEx, I'm so sorry. But you may want to note these answers. A relative is not an immediate family member. We talked a little bit about that. A board can't hire a relative of themselves, one of their members, unless they have, so you might want to put a little asterisk there. The ECS can tell them they can, they need that waiver. For this one, that's a false. The majority of board members can only get back into voting, not to form a committee, when they use doctrine of necessity. This one is true. The keywords is in the district. If a board member has anyone belonging to them who works in the district, they're out as far as evaluating chief school administrator. That next one, the board was a teacher, blah, 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 we flipped that, that's why that's false. And of course, the assistant superintendent cannot evaluate the principal if chief school administrator, if the assistant superintendent's son is a teacher.
Can I ask a qualifying question on that last one?
Sure.
Can the superintendent evaluate the principal in the building where the superintendent has children?
Yes. Yes. You may want to ask for an advisory opinion on that or ask your attorney, but there are superintendents in districts who have children attending those schools.
I was quick
Those
to
are
question,
valid
sorry.
capabilities as far as I know.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing, Scott, is that with the Ethics Act, it doesn't give up it doesn't curtail anyone's rights as a parent. So if you're having a meeting with your child's teacher, or or the board is looking to vote for, a field trip, right? Something like that. Those don't really come into odds with you as a board member. If you're meeting with a child's teacher or someone belonging to his teacher, the district where you're a board member, just lead with, look, I'm here as a parent, not as a board member. And act accordingly. There's always something a little bit different about interacting with students, you're a board member, but just make it plain that you're there as a parent, and you can certainly do that. It's your child. What you shouldn't be doing is going in with your sister to meet with their IEP, to meet with the child study team about an IEP for their kid. Because that doesn't, that gives the justifiable impression that you're there as a board member. It's not your concern. And if that doesn't sound good, by any means, ask me about it. I'm happy to expand on it. Volunteerism we like to touch on because for many years there were no guidelines on volunteering in the schools. But then someone misbehaved, and then an advisory opinion was asked for, and the commission thought, you know what? Maybe we should start thinking about what board members need to ask themselves when they go into the schools, just to make sure that what they're performing there does not interfere with their job as a board member. So this particular slide has a series of 7 questions. And if you're looking to volunteer in the schools, ask yourself these questions. If your answers are the same that's put up here, then you're good. And if they're different for any one of these, you may need to re-examine your volunteer role, or you may need to abstain from it. Basically, one-time, infrequent roles that have nothing to do with giving directions to anybody or receiving directions from anybody, like Read Across America Day or chaperone a field trip or something like that, those are fine. If you're on PTO and you're running events for the PTO, even if you're raising money for the PTO and that money goes eventually to the school district, but immediately it goes into the PTO's bank account, you're good. You're good. I will tell you, you can continue those events. But what I can tell you is that if you are a member of the PTO and the PTO donates the money to the board, you need to abstain from that vote, accepting the money, if you're a member of the PTO. Otherwise, you're good. If you're running a club under the PTO's auspices, you're fine. But you can't run a club under the auspices of the school district. So High Point is, going to start a cartography club, and you're an amateur cartographer. As much as it might kill you, you can't be the lead volunteer or volunteer in any way for that club. But if the PTO bring a cartography club, then that's fine. I hope that makes sense. Interview committees is something else I like to touch on. I don't know if you guys use interview committees. Do you do that at High Point?
I don't believe so. That'll be cool with that.
Okay, well, it's up to the superintendent whether or not he thinks that would be useful, not up to the board. But if the superintendent does decide to have an interview committee and have board members on it, there's some very strict guidelines that he has to follow. I'm happy to say the majority of districts don't use interview committees. They trust the wisdom of the superintendent. If you do look at these advisory opinions, A3115 and A412, that address the topic, they're very lengthy. What was not lengthy is advisory opinion A15-10, in which a board member asked if they could have exit interviews with staff that resigned. And it was just a real hard no, that would be at odds with subsection B. That has to do with managing the day-to-day operations of the school district and not oversight. Very firm opinion.
There were two occasions in the past where board members sat in on the interviews, both of which were very early on when I was superintendent. The first of which was for principal.
Talk louder so she can hear you.
Early on, when I was superintendent, my first year, we needed to hire a principal, and the board essentially conducted those interviews. It was my first year, I wasn't in a position to change that. And formerly, there was a board member who sat in on the interview of the current BA, and it was a situation that I didn't have the ability to change, just for the sake of updating on that.
Understood. Well,
If we can wrap
I'm
up,
glad
Kathy.
you got our waters now. Because you know what, honestly, the superintendent directs the hiring process, period. Absolutely, period. What the superintendent says, goes. That's your job, that's what you're there for. So if you want an interview committee, great, but if you don't, no interview committee. You know, you know, if those decisions are pretty compelling, you may want to take a look at them.
Kathy, if you could wrap up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bill, you have a question?
I was asking if you could wrap up, or we still need to get to executive session.
Oh, yeah, this is my last slide, actually.
Okay, thank you.
And basically, it's kind of a, you know, making a point that if you have a question, consult with your attorney as your best source on information with the Ethics Act. Read your school board notes. If there's new decisions or new guidance that comes out, you will read it there, and also keep track of where your relatives are working, so you can determine whether or not you're conflicted. And that's kind of it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain them, you know, offline. Just give me a call anytime. I'm here to help you, and I really do appreciate your commitment to learning about the Ethics Act and good governance. It's just such a hallmark. I just miss seeing you guys face to face.
Can we see your face for a minute? We know you're here with us.
Yeah, let's see. How do we do it? Is it?
No, Kathy does it from her screen, I think.
No, she's on there. She's on the top right corner.
She has-
Yeah, no, well. All right, good night.
Thank you, Kathy.
Stay healthy, everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
With the conclusion, does anybody want to make a motion to go to executive session? Motion. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing nobody opposed, we'll move to executive session. We have a motion to go back to public session.
So moved.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing nobody opposed, we'll go back to public session. We're going to skip by unfinished business and go to approval of the minutes. Did somebody make a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion.
Second. Any discussion?
Already second.
Seconds, any discussion? Seeing no discussion? Take roll call.
Mr. Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Krause?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe?
Yes. Public comments. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, we will open the public comments for agenda items only at this time. Each speaker should state his name, her name and address. You will have 3 minutes to address the board, which will be timed by me. We will limit the section to no longer than 45 minutes. Actually, we're going to change that to 15 minutes today. We think that's enough time, and we also have a state curfew that we want to comply with. So please be respectful. Mind that your comments are being recorded, and it's not a question and answer period. It's just for public comments, and please address your comments today. We'll start off with Mr. Getler. Would you like to speak?
Getler, Warren's Township. I hope your budget is a joke. Because it's sick. It's a $2,035,000 increase. We can't afford it. I know you're having problems. Everybody's having problems. Vegas loses a lot of people in these towns aren't going to be employed for the next couple of weeks or months because businesses they work for are forced to shut down. They couldn't afford this before that happened. They surely can't afford it now. You read the article in Sunday's paper about the county budget and had a number of misstatements, incorrect numbers. The tax at the county went up 2.079 million, not over 3 million. But it wasn't a 1.83% increase, it was 2.25% increase. Based on my calculations, well, last year, Wantage, Branchville, and Newton were in the hot seat. Wantage, we saw a tax increase, total about $85. This year, Lafayette has it all to themselves. With the increase of the county budget and now the library budget, which went up over 6%, they're not even speaking about, Lafayette, the average homeowner, is going to see an increase about $136 just for the county budget. Quick numbers, assuming you'd have no increase, Lafayette was going up another 200. That's over 300. With this $2 million increase in your taxes, I have no idea where they're going to be or where anybody else is going to be. People just can't afford this. I know you have problems. Your student population went down from the state numbers another 15. The number in the newspaper about a week ago on 721, I contacted the girl that questioned the number because the state told me it's down to 796. So there's a big difference between 721 and 796. This number's got to be cut. People just can't afford it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing nobody else, I'm sorry, we have somebody else public comment. Again, please give your name, your address, and we'll put you on for 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Jan Tiger. I live in Wantage, 46 Southwood Drive. Please don't hunt me down. I'm a teacher, a German teacher here, which you may or may not know. I am addressing specifically one of your agenda items that is for the German exchange program, bringing in German exchange students in October. It's an excellent program to have these students come over and to some extent mirror our students. At the same time, they will see some sights and experience the U.S. And hopefully sometime down the road we can reciprocate and send them over there. But in the meantime, it's a great program, and I appreciate you guys putting it on your agenda for approval, hopefully for approval. And that's all I got.
Thank you very much. And I like your attire. Is there, not to be presumptuous, are there any other people who want public comments? Seeing nobody else with public comments, we're going to skip the presentations tonight to try to comply with the state curfew law. I'm going to skip the board objectives. And would like to take a minute on the other business. Would you like to say something on the district health-related preparedness plan?
We are currently closed for a 2-week period. That is quite conservative. We anticipate that will likely be longer, but we were prepared with a plan prior to going out, and that plan has actually been implemented exceptionally well. The staff and the administration have worked together as a one unit, and the instruction, the virtual instruction has been ongoing now. This is the second day. So far, things have been going very, very well. There is cooperation between all stakeholders, and it's been very effective. The length of time that we're going to have to endure this right now is unknown. It could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, perhaps even longer. It is not ideal. We get very little direction or definitive direction from the state, as I think that they're learning this as we are learning it as well. But we're doing the best we can to make decisions in the best interest of students and the community. And right now, our singular focus is on the safety and the well-being of our students. For those who are concerned about the days missed, they have been approved to count toward the requirement of 180 days for a school year. While that is not our primary concern, it is an important consideration, and I wanted to communicate that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to skip over the state aid cuts. I believe we'll address later, and the district goals we can address at another time. Then move on to action items. Start with curriculum. Leanne?
So I'm going to make a motion, seek a second, to move items 1 through 10. Faculty attendance rate, student attendance rate, suspension report, harassment, intimidation, bullying report, curricular and co-curricular field trips, professional development, extended school year, German exchange program, health-related preparedness plan, and a recommendation for a student to observe as part of the field experience.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just quickly on item number 9, Dr. Ripley, it's my understanding that the board doesn't, this is a precautionary measure, but the board doesn't actually need to approve this health-related preparedness plan. Is that true?
It is not required, according to the governor. It is not required board approval nor executive county superintendent approval, however, so as to demonstrate unity of our purpose and our plan and to incorporate the board as stakeholders into what we're doing as a community. I thought it appropriate for them to have a role in that. That's why it was placed on the agenda.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing no more discussion, would you take a roll call, please?
Mr. Arnold.
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Dr. Crosser.
Yes.
Ms. Nugent.
Yes.
Mr. Dona.
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe.
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe.
Yes. Next, I'd move on to personnel. Yeah.
I'm gonna look to move, number 1, it no longer applies. Move numbers 2 through 5. Number 2 has to do with the retirement notification of Connie Guerrera. Say that again?
Yes.
Okay. Number 3 is the approval of substitutes for the remainder of the school year. Number 4 is the approval of the extended sick leave and FMLA leave of absence. Number 5 is a retroactive approval of the 6-period assignments that's listed. That's it. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I would like to say congratulations to Ms. Guerrera for a tremendous career and time at High Point. She is highly regarded by those with whom she works, and her efforts at High Point are noted. She has been here for quite some time and has been nothing but an asset to the students, the staff, the district, and the community. And I wish her nothing but the best. We will miss her terribly. As I have frequently stated, there are probably about 3 bus drivers in the Western Hemisphere, so her leaving is going to be a difficult staffing to fulfill. Even if there were droves, she would still be a loss because of her effectiveness. Congratulations, Bonnie.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Kraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Donna?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe?
Yes. Extracurricular, I'm going to move 1 through 5. Number 1, it's recommended approve June 25th to June 26th for hours 8 to 3 o'clock. School doctor to perform physicals for the 2021 sports season. 22, it's recommended to approve the sidebar agreement between the High Point and the Educational Association, a newly created unified track position. The single step stipend of $1,500. It's recommended that the board approve the Interact Club hosting the Valerie Fund Toy Drive for the Gorham Children's Hospital of Morristown. 4, it's recommended the superintendent that the Board of Education approves painting as parking spot fundraiser run by the junior and senior class advisors. The proceeds go into the appropriate class student account. And number 5, it's recommended that the superintendent that the board approves the swim and ice hockey cooperative agreement done via Google Forms with Wallkill Valley Regional High School for the 2021 and 21-22 school years. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
On number 2, was that part of negotiations with the High Point Education Association? Okay.
We did not have a negotiations committee meeting regarding that. It was distributed in committee and discussed and disseminated, but it was not in negotiations, not to my recollection.
It was not in the negotiations committee, and I believe the HPEA didn't demand negotiations on it.
Because it's a set fee, correct? That's the amount, that's the grant.
The grant is for $2,500. The position of coach is for $1,500. The rest of the grant has to do with paying paraprofessionals to assist medically students who need medical assistance, or at least who need physical assistance according to their IEP, and it also has to do with cost of uniforms.
Any other discussion points? Seeing no further discussion, have a roll call.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Kraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Donna?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe?
Yes. Policy. Gail?
Just one item, it's recommended, it has to do with the revised policy and regulation for school visitors. It's quite bold. Can I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Kraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Donna?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe?
Yes. Negotiations, there are no negotiation item at this time. There are no building and grounds issues at this time. So we'll move on to finance. Wayne?
In finance, I would like to move items 1 through 12. That is all of the items with the exception of number 9, which I will move separately. Items 1 through 3 are acceptance of reports for the month of February 2020 from the Board Secretary, Business Administrator, the report of the Treasurer, and the report of transfers and minimum expense transfer report. Item 4 is the approval for payments of other expended bills. Item 5 is acceptance of accounts as listed. Item 6 is accepting a donation from a meal for a meal in the amount of $5,000. Item 7 is the acceptance of both donations from Sue Di Stefano. And item 8 is acceptance of a donation from Dora Labs in the amount of $2,000. Skipping 9, item 10 is recommendation to approve tuition contracts between High Point and ascending districts as listed. Item 11 is recommendation to approve tuition contracts between High Point and Assembly District as listed. And item 12 is a recommendation to approve the principal's request for the creation of the following new student activities accounts, those two as listed. Make a motion on those items. Ask for a second. Second. Any discussion on items 1 through 12 with the exception of item 9? I'd just like to add our thanks for the generous donations from our community. Can I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Carrazza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Dodona?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Okay, returning to item 9. Unfortunately, I'm going to read this one in its entirety. Be it resolved that the board approves the adoption of the attendance school budget for the 2020-2021 school year as follows. First, travel and related expense reimbursement. Whereas the High Point Regional High School Board of Education recognizes school staff and board members will incur travel expenses related to and within the scope of their current responsibilities and for travel that promotes the delivery of instruction or furthers the efficient operations of the school district. And whereas NJAC, as listed, requires board members to receive approval of these expenses by a majority of the full voting membership of the board, and staff members receive prior approval of these expenses by the superintendent of schools and a majority of the full voting membership of the board. And whereas the High Point Regional High School Board of Ed may establish for further district business travel only an annual schools year threshold of $1,500 per staff member, where prior board approval shall not be required unless the annual threshold for a staff member is exceeded in a given school year. And whereas travel and related expenses not in compliance with NJAC as listed, but deemed by the High Point Regional High School Board of Ed to be necessary and unavoidable as noted on the approved High Point Regional High School Board of Education out of district travel and reimbursement forms. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the High Point Regional High School Board of Education approves all travel not in compliance with NJAC as listed as being necessary and unavoidable as noted on the approved High Point Regional High School Board of Education out of district travel and reimbursement forms. And be it further resolved, the High Point Regional High School Board of Ed approves travel and related expense reimbursements in accordance with NJAC as listed to a maximum expenditure of $75,000 for all staff and board members. Adoption of budget 2020-2021. Be it resolved that the budget be approved for the 2020-2021 school year using the 2020-2021 state aid figures, and the secretary to the High Point Regional High School Board of Education be authorized to submit the following budget to the Executive County Superintendent of Schools. I will read just a few of the columns, the total columns. Total expenditures, $23,413,811, less anticipated revenues of $6,840,928, yields taxes to be raised of $16,572,883. Be it resolved that the High Point Board of Education approves the levy of general fund taxes for the 2020-2021 school year to be $16,572,883. The 2020-21 tax levy is inclusive of bank cap in the amount of $1,744,688. State aid has been reduced by $1.723 million over the past 4 years. This budget addresses health and safety issues related to facility and capital projects and student-centered items and program integrity. Capital outlay. Be it resolved that the High Point Regional High School Board of Ed requests to approve capital outlay for the 2020-2021 tentative school budget in the amount of $571,059 for the following projects at High Point Regional High School as contained in the amended long-range facility plan. Storage tank removal of $100,000, roofs, HVAC, rooftop units, driveways, drainage of $471,059. And to advertise said tentative budget in the New Jersey Herald in accordance with the form suggested by the State Department of Education and according to law.
Second.
Any discussion on item 9?
If I can, on the capital budget, capital outlays, if I can point out, if I'm not mistaken, we had the long-term facility plan presented by the engineers, and the long-term facility plan, these are just not upgrades. These capital projects that are referred to in the budget are requirements minimum requirements that we need to do to maintain a 50-year-old facility. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yes.
I agree. I was at the meeting at the long-range facilities, the long-term planning committee that you held, and the architects were there with their reports, and our long-term facility plan, thanks, is extensive, and that's a state mandated plan that we have to have. We are, with these things that we have to fix and maintain, is minimal compared to what that entire plan was. And we were very carefully looking at it. I know you know this because you were there, I'm just speaking out loud there, but we had to very carefully look at this to see what it was that we absolutely had to get done immediately to maintain the integrity of this building and physical plan. And this is what we came up with. So we've been doing this since August, going through this.
So none of it is additional upgrades or expansions, it's
Correct.
just maintaining and removing the old tank on a 50-year-old building. And if I'm not mistaken, Jim, how much was the state aid cut this year?
754,000.
54. So that alone is well over 1.2 million, when you 1.3 million of the budget. I mean, just trying to maintain the building and make up for the state aid cut. And I believe just a minimum, if I'm not mistaken, the union contract, Jim, please correct me if I'm mistaken, the union contract which provides for a minimum percentage increase compared to the average of the unions in the area, that alone with the cost of the increase to the union, that the union gets and deserves, and their benefits, I believe over 400,000?
Correct.
So most of this increase all relates to just meeting their legal requirements of paying the increase required by the contract, maintaining the facility, a 50-year-old facility, and making it up for state aid cuts. To encompass the bulk of this.
And I also believe too that we discussed that it's going to be a cut in some, not necessarily through attrition, through some positions.
We have discussed the full-time equivalency reductions year over year. Over the last several years, we have reduced significant numbers, and we will continue in this year. The budgeted amount is a reduction of 4 certificated staff members and a security personnel.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Last opportunity to speak. Okay. May I have a roll call?
Dr. Crosby,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Mr. Dona,
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe,
Yes.
Mr. Arnold,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe.
Yes. All right, we're going to move on to transportation.
At this time, I move items 1 through 4. Item number 1 is a joint transportation agreement with the city of Vineland as listed. Number 2 is a quoted route for transportation of a special needs student for the current school year. Number 3 is a quoted contracts for trips for the current school year. Number 4 is a quoted route for transportation of a special needs student, transport home for the current school year as listed. Item is 1 through 4. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? That's for roll call.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Caraza?
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe?
Yes.
And finally, just item number 5, recommended the approval of the following completed bus evacuation drills for the current school year as listed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Caraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe?
Yes. Long-term planning, we have nothing on long-term planning at this point in time. We have nothing on legal, nothing on correspondence, nothing on miscellaneous. We're now going to open up public comments. If anybody would like to make a public comment, we're going to use the same thing. We'll give you 3 minutes. We'll keep it to 15 minutes. And you don't have to keep the agenda item. We just please address me. And remember, you're being recorded. Please be respectful.
Go get her from Wantage again, 98 Emerald Road. I didn't make your meeting on the change then, because I was in the pre-order meeting on their draft copy of the budget. Of course, the first budget was a $1.7 million increase. And when they came back with the proposed budget, they upped it $360,000 more, to over $2 million. So instead of cutting it, they increased it. But I'd like to thank the board for not adopting the transgender policy. A few students should not have rights that deny the other students their constitutional rights. I don't see how anyone can go along with that policy. I haven't read your policy, I just asked for a copy of it. I have Sussex Wantage's policy that they adopted. Most of the students now have lost their constitutional rights. It's not there. I'm hoping somebody is going to sue the Sussex Wantage Board. I don't have any children in the school. I know several parents who are talking about pulling their students out of Sussex Wantage, putting them into a Catholic school. I know some that don't have children in school yet, but they have children. They have no intentions of putting them into Sussex Wantage. I hope by the time their kids get to be of age to go to the school, somebody has sued the tail off of Sussex Wantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gill. Any other public comments? Again, please rename.
Young Tiger, Wantage. I apologize, this is my first time at these, so I'm flying to yell. I wanted to ask or informally submit the possibility of High Point endorsed exchange program bringing students over to the other side, across the Atlantic. Instead of us having brought them here, there's no reciprocation so far. I know we've had it in the past at the school, there have been some issues. But those issues can be dealt with, and I'm all open for proposals on that. My thought process is that, I apologize.
It's fine.
My thought process is that there really is no cost to High Point, except that there's an endorsement. So it makes it, I'll say, competitive with the other local schools that do have a program like that, to bring students overseas and experience the culture as well as the school program on the other side. And the no-cost aspect is it's also further supported by the fact that in Germany, the school year goes till about middle of July. So our students wouldn't have to leave school until school year is over here, so they wouldn't actually miss school at all. Almost be like a vacation for them in a sense. And therefore, they don't miss out here. I plan on applying for grant money, and the rest will just have to be raised by the students themselves to go. But that's my thing, so I think. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much.
I would just like to inform the board regarding this matter. I don't know to what reference there was about problems. This current board and the board during my time on as superintendent has supported overseas travel on several occasions. But I will say that this issue has not been brought to the attention of the administration as of yet. And so the appropriate course would be to bring it to the administration. So if it is something that we believe is appropriate, in the best interest of our students, we would certainly pursue. But that would be the starting point.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may respond also, I do know that my daughter, while at High Point, did travel over to Europe on an exchange student, I believe during the summer, that was sponsored through High Point, and she said it was one of the best learning experiences she had involved with High Point in all of 4 years at High Point. And it was truly taking the languages and being able to use it and live the environment of the culture that she was studying, and talks about it today, and is about what a great experience it was. If no other comments, I'm going to leave off the non-committee board member reports and other business, and see if we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing nobody opposed to adjourning, we'll adjourn the meeting.